The air in the solicitor's office, thick with the scent of aged paper and faded lilies, perfectly mirrored the morbid proceedings. Elara sank into a velvet armchair that seemed to consume her, her gaze riveted on the polished mahogany desk. Mr. Albright, a man whose spectacles perpetually threatened to slip from his nose, cleared his throat, a small preparatory sound. Across from her, Silas, her elder brother, practically thrummed with ill-concealed triumph, his expensive suit strained over his broad frame. Daphne, her sister, perched delicately on the edge of her seat, occasionally stroking the silk of her dress, her practiced nonchalance barely concealing a vibrant anticipation. And to my eldest son, Silas Thorne, I bequeath the entirety of the Thorne Industries shares, valued at a conservative estimate of... Mr. Albright's voice droned on, punctuated by the whisper of rustling documents. Elara registered the colossal figures, feeling them wash over her like a chilling tide. Silas exhaled a soft, almost imperceptible sigh of gratification, a faint smirk playing on his lips. Aunt Beatrice, seated beside Daphne, nodded her approval, her silver hair impeccably styled, her pearl necklace gleaming. She flicked a quick, appraising glance at Elara, a familiar current of thinly veiled judgment in her eyes. Then came Daphne's turn. A sprawling Tuscan vineyard, a villa nestled in the south of France, and a substantial trust fund. Daphne offered a demure smile, a theatrical flutter of her eyelashes. "How unexpected," she murmured, though her eyes sparkled with unbridled triumph. Aunt Beatrice actually clapped her hands once, a brittle sound that grated on Elara's nerves. Elara's portion felt like a forgotten postscript. She braced herself, a hollow ache expanding in her chest. Their father-daughter relationship had always been tenuous, a quiet, almost invisible thread in the grand tapestry of his life. But to be so utterly dismissed? And to my youngest daughter, Elara Vance, Mr. Albright paused, adjusting his spectacles. "I leave the property known as the Forgotten Cottage, located on the outskirts of Blackwood, along with its contents, and a sum of £500 for its immediate upkeep." The ensuing silence was profound, suffocating. Silas snorted, a derisive sound he quickly attempted to disguise with a cough. Daphne pursed her lips, a flicker of disdain crossing her features. Aunt Beatrice, however, was less circumspect. She scoffed, a distinct, audible sound, then leaned in to whisper something to Daphne. Elara didn't need to hear the words. The message was clear, paltry, worthless, an outright embarrassment. A sudden flush of warmth spread across Elara's cheeks. She gripped the arms of the chair, her knuckles white against the dark velvet. £500. For a cottage she barely remembered, a place her father had never mentioned, a property clearly neglected for decades. It was a stinging affront, a stark declaration of her subordinate position in the family hierarchy. Later, in the opulent drawing room where champagne flowed and laughter echoed, her siblings celebrated their burgeoning fortunes. Silas, surrounded by fawning relatives, boasted of his ambitious plans for Thorne Industries. Daphne, radiant and composed, discussed potential renovations for her Italian villa. Elara stood by the window, clutching a glass of lukewarm ginger ale, feeling like a spectral presence at her own father's wake. No one approached her, no one offered sympathy, no one even met her gaze. She was an inconvenience, a lingering shadow. Aunt Beatrice, however, eventually sought her out. "Honestly, Elara," she began, her voice taut with disapproval. "A cottage? And that meagre sum? Your father always was peculiar about you. I suppose it's for the best. You always were better suited to a quiet life, weren't you?" Her words, intended as a dismissive consolation, stung with their implicit judgment of Elara's perceived inadequacy. Elara simply nodded, unable to trust her voice. She felt a strange cocktail of anger and a burgeoning sense of liberation. They had offered her nothing, and in doing so, they had unshackled her from their expectations. Mr. Albright eventually reappeared, a small, worn wooden box held carefully in his hands. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice now noticeably softer, "the deed to the forgotten cottage and its key." He presented her with a single, tarnished brass key, heavy and cool, in her palm. The deed, folded and creased, felt ancient, whispering of forgotten times. She unfolded it, scanning the faded script. "The Vance Cottage, Blackwood." A surge of curiosity, sharp and unexpected, pierced through her numbness. What was this place? Why had her father kept it secret? Why had he left it to her? It was a question no one else seemed to contemplate, a mystery no one else even thought to ponder. As she departed the grand estate, the cold night air biting at her exposed skin, the key felt less like a burden and more like a mysterious invitation. The forgotten cottage. It sounded not like an ending, but the genesis of a story. A dusty welcome. The deer trail narrowed, then dissolved into a thorny thicket, beyond which a forgotten cottage lay ensnared by rampant ivy. Elara clutched the worn leather satchel holding her scant possessions, the keen morning air biting at her skin. Her father's solicitor had provided directions so obscure they seemed designed to deter any prospective inhabitant. Sunlight, fractured and pale, struggled through the ancient oak canopy, perpetually cloaking the dwelling in shadow. The roofline bowed like an old man's weary shoulders. Several windows were boarded, others filmed opaque with grime. A lone, rickety porch step groaned under her tentative weight. The front door, once a cheerful blue, now shed flakes of paint, revealing sun-bleached wood beneath. It felt less like an inheritance and more a monument to her father's final, dismissive gesture. The door shrieked open, its protest echoing through the heavy silence. A thick, musty aroma, damp earth decay, forgotten lives, assaulted her senses. Dust motes danced in the anemic light, filtering through the grimy panes, creating a suffocating, ethereal haze. The air hung still, undisturbed for decades. Cobwebs, thick with generations of dust, festooned every corner, swaying like morbid lace. As her eyes adjusted, the main room slowly materialized. A disused stone hearth dominated one wall. A broken wooden chair lay prone, its legs akimbo like a dying insect. In a corner, a mound, once perhaps a table, was now buried under fallen plaster, withered leaves, and an unidentifiable layer of grit. It was far worse than she'd imagined. The solicitor's neglected now seemed a polite fabrication. This was not neglect. This was outright abandonment, a deliberate slight. A cold, heavy wave of despair washed over her. Her siblings, ensconced in their opulent homes, would find this scene hilarious. Their imagined sneer from Silas, Daphne's pitying gaze, left a bitter taste. Was this truly her destiny? To be cast out, gifted a ruin, while they revelled in their father's empire? An unwelcome tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek, tasting of salt and defeat. But the tear dried swiftly. This was no place for self-pity if she intended to survive. The key, warm and solid in her pocket, suddenly felt less a burden and more a challenge. Her father, for all his cruelty, had given her something, and it was unequivocally hers. A fierce, almost defiant satisfaction bloomed within her. No one could take this. No one could dictate its use. She dropped her satchel with a soft thump, surprisingly loud in the stillness. Rolling up the sleeves of her practical faded tunic, Ilara resurveyed the room. The task seemed monumental, overwhelming, yet a strange spark ignited within her. This wasn't merely a cottage, it was a tabula rasa, her tabula rasa. She found a broken broom, its bristles matted and stiff. It would have to suffice. The first sweep unleashed a dust cloud so dense it made her cough, the air thick with a sense of old wood and forgotten memories. Each stroke was an act of defiance, a small reclamation. She dragged the broken chair outside, its splintered wood snagging on the doorframe. The weak sunlight felt like a benediction as she inhaled the comparatively fresh air. Hours blurred into a rhythm of sweeping, wiping, and hauling. Beneath a collapsed shelf, she unearthed a stack of cracked ceramic plates. A rusted kettle lay on the hearth. Each small find, however insignificant, felt like a tiny victory against the pervasive decay. Her back ached, her hands were grimy, and dust had permeated every crease of her clothing. Yet a fragile, persistent sense of purpose began to take root. This forgotten cottage might be her father's final barb, but she would transform it into her sanctuary. She would make it her own, and perhaps, just perhaps, within its crumbling walls, she might discover more than just dust. The whisper of a key, the persistent sense of damp earth and something vaguely metallic clung to the kitchen, a smell Ilara was determined to banish. She attacked the grime with a vigour born of spite and a growing, fierce independence. Sunlight, hesitant at first, now streamed through the single, begrimed window, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air and highlighting the ingrained dirt on the flagstone floor. She scrubbed at the thick, sticky residue on the ancient wooden counter, her movements precise and unyielding. The cottage might be a relic, but it would be her relic, clean and orderly. As she knelt to tackle a particularly stubborn patch of mildew near the hearth, her hand brushed against something uneven. A loose floorboard, her brow furrowed. It wasn't just loose, it felt manipulated. Curiosity, a rare visitor in the Vance manor, now tugged insistently. She pressed down on the corner, and with a faint creak, the plank lifted slightly. Beneath it, nestled in a shallow, dust-choked cavity, lay a small, tarnished object. Ilara's breath hitched. She reached in, her fingers closing around a heavy, cold piece of metal. It was a key, dark with age and encrusted with rust, its intricate head hinting at a forgotten elegance. It felt ancient, heavy with secrets. A shiver, not of cold, but of anticipation, traced its way down her spine. A hidden key. In her father's house, such a discovery would have been met with suspicion, questions, and an immediate confiscation. Here, in her own dilapidated domain, it felt like an invitation. A whisper of possibility in the oppressive silence. She turned the key over in her palm, its teeth a jagged silhouette against the sliver of light filtering through the floorboards. It was larger than any household key she knew, more substantial, almost ceremonial. The lock it belonged to must be equally significant. Her initial thought was the main entrance, perhaps a forgotten spare, but the cottage's front door was secured by a modern, if somewhat sticky, bolt. This key felt older, heavier, as if it belonged to a time before her father's practical, unadorned world. Elara rose, the key clutched tight, her cleaning forgotten, a new, more compelling task presented itself. The cottage, she realized, was more than just a place to mend her wounded pride. It was a puzzle, and this key was the first piece. She ascended the creaking stairs, the floorboards groaning under her weight like old bones. The upper floor consisted of 3 small bedrooms and a landing. She tried the key first on the door to the largest bedroom, the one she'd claimed as her own. The lock, a simple brass mechanism, was too small, the key's teeth too wide. It wouldn't even slide in. Next, the smallest bedroom, likely a guest room. Its door, already ajar, revealing a bare, dusty space. The lock was missing entirely. The third bedroom, its door stubbornly shut, presented a similar challenge to the first. The key was simply too large, too ornate, to fit the standard, rather flimsy locks. Frustration pricked at her, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of excitement. This wasn't just any old key, then. It was for something more specific, more secluded. Her gaze swept across the landing, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the cobweb-draped corners, the faint outline of a forgotten painting where it had once hung. Nothing. She descended the stairs slowly, her mind racing, cataloguing every locked door, every potential chest or cabinet she'd seen. There weren't many. The cottage was sparse, stripped of anything valuable long before her arrival. Her father wouldn't have left anything of worth for her to find, not intentionally. Back in the kitchen, the sunlight had shifted, casting long shadows. Her eyes, now trained for clues, scanned the room. The pantry door was unlocked, its shelves bare. The back door, leading to a small, overgrown yard, had a simple latch. Then her gaze fell upon it. A dark, heavy, wooden door set into the wall opposite the hearth. It was almost seamlessly blended into the wainscoting, an unassuming rectangle of aged timber. The handle was a rusty iron ring, and the gap beneath it suggested a deep, narrow space beyond. The basement. A prickle of unease, swiftly followed by a spark of determination, ignited within her. The basement had been a place of dread in her childhood home, a dark, cavernous space where the true, unspeakable ugliness of her family's legacy was stored. But this cottage, her cottage, was different. Here, the darkness held not fear, but possibility. She approached the door, the key feeling almost alive in her hand. The air grew colder, heavier as she drew near. No, not fear, she reminded herself. Curiosity. This was her inheritance, her mystery, and she would unravel it, piece by piece, starting with the whisper of a key. Her fingers, still slightly stained with soot from the floorboard, reached for the iron ring. It was cold and rough beneath her touch. She pulled. The door groaned, a low, drawn-out sound that echoed in the quiet kitchen, but it didn't open fully. A faint, earthy smell, distinct from the dampness of the kitchen, wafted out. And there, set into the ancient wood, was a lock. Old, tarnished brass, far more substantial than any upstairs. Its keyhole was intricate, almost ornate, a perfect match for the strange, rusty key clutched in her hand. Her heart thumped a quick, erratic rhythm against her ribs. This was it. The whisper was growing louder, almost a shout. She raised the key, its weight grounding her, and carefully, deliberately inserted it into the waiting lock. It slid in smoothly, a perfect fit. A sharp intake of breath escaped her lips. The moment hung suspended, charged with unspoken expectation. What lay beyond this door? What secrets had her father, in his final, cruel jest, inadvertently bestowed upon her? A thrill, wild and intoxicating, coursed through her veins. This wasn't just a key to a basement. It was a key to a new beginning. She twisted it, feeling the satisfying resistance of tumblers turning, and heard a soft, distinct click. The sound resonated in the quiet cottage, a promise, a challenge, and an undeniable invitation. Into the hidden depths. The brass key, unexpectedly substantial in Ilara's palm, seemed to anchor the sudden lightness in her chest. The basement door, until now a forgotten detail in the cottage's decay, now thrummed with a nearly magnetic pull. A tremor, not solely from the cold, seeping beneath the jamb, traced a path down her spine. This journey transcended a mere restoration of pride. It was something profound, something unknown. She nudged the door open slowly, the rusty hinges groaning in protest, a sound like a forgotten behemoth stirring from a long slumber. A wave of musty, damp air, redolent of earth and ancient wood, enveloped her. It was darker than anticipated, the single grimy bulb above casting a feeble, jaundiced glow that barely pierced the gloom. Shadows stretched and danced in the corners, transforming mundane shapes into grotesque figures. Ilara paused on the threshold, a primal apprehension of enclosed, unknown spaces bubbling to the surface. Her gaze swept the scene. Haphazard stacks of decaying furniture, their upholstery shredded by the ravages of time and gnawing creatures, cobweb-draped shelves laden with forgotten jars and tools, and at the heart of it all, a large, looming furnace, its rusted pipes coiling towards the ceiling like metallic anacondas. This was no cozy, dust-mote-filled attic of childhood fancy, but a mausoleum of forgotten things. Taking a deep breath, she stepped over the threshold, her footsteps echoing unnervingly on the uneven stone floor. The air grew colder with each step, pricking at her skin. Her hand instinctively sought the antique key, still clutched tightly. It was a tangible tether to her discovery, a reminder that this was more than just a scary old basement. It was a repository of secrets she was destined to unearth. She navigated around a precariously stacked pile of splintered wooden crates, their contents long since lost to the annals of time or decay. Her eyes, still adjusting to the poor illumination, scanned the rough-hewn stone walls. There was nothing immediately evident, just the raw, unyielding texture of ancient rock. She circled the large furnace, its cold metal exuding an oppressive stillness. It was just as she neared the brink of conceding defeat, her initial excitement dimming under the weight of the oppressive atmosphere, that she noticed it. Behind a towering stack of particularly grimy crates, nestled against the far wall, was a faint, almost imperceptible line. It wasn't a crack in the masonry, but a deliberate, impossibly thin seam running vertically and then horizontally, forming a rectangular outline in the stone. It was so artfully crafted, so subtly disguised, that it could easily be mistaken for an optical illusion or a natural imperfection in the rock. A jolt of adrenaline shot through her. This was it. This had to be it. She wrestled with the crates, their wood protesting with loud squeals as she dragged them aside. Dust, thick and ancient, billowed into the air, eliciting a cough. The effort was immense, her muscles straining, but the certainty that she was close, so tantalizingly close, fueled her. Finally, with a grunt, the last crate scraped away, fully revealing the outline. It was a door, seamlessly integrated into the stone wall, with no visible handle or hinge. Elara traced the faint lines with her fingertips along the cold stone. There was a tiny, almost invisible indentation near the center, a circular depression no bigger than her thumbnail. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Could it be? She fumbled for the key, her fingers trembling slightly. The ornate head of the key, with its intricate carvings, was a perfect fit for the indentation. With a surge of anticipation, she inserted the key. It slid in smoothly, with a satisfying click that resonated in the silent basement. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low rumble that vibrated through the floor and up her legs, a section of the stone wall slowly, inexorably, began to recede inwards. It wasn't a swing, but a slow, grinding slide, revealing a chasm of inky blackness behind it. The air that wafted from the newly revealed opening was even colder, carrying a strangely clean, almost sterile scent, utterly distinct from the musty air of the basement. Elara peered into the darkness, her breath catching in her throat. The passage was impossibly deep, a void that seemed to swallow the meagre light from the basement's bulb. A profound sense of awe, mixed with a healthy dose of trepidation, washed over her. She had found it. She had found something truly hidden. What lay within those depths, she could only begin to imagine, but the promise of discovery was a powerful siren song, pulling her forward. The forgotten cottage was anything but empty. It held secrets, and she, Elara Vance, was about to uncover them. The glimmer in the chest. Elara stepped through the newly revealed doorway, her hand still clutched around the brass key. The air beyond was different, stale, heavy, yet devoid of the oppressive dampness that permeated the rest of the basement. A narrow, descending stone staircase spiraled into darkness, each step worn smooth by time and unseen feet. She fumbled in her pocket for the small oil lamp she'd thought to bring, its weak flame flickering to life, chasing away the absolute black. The passage was short, perhaps no more than a dozen steps, before it opened into a small, square chamber. The walls were rough-hewn stone, devoid of plaster or decoration, suggesting utility over comfort. In the centre, bathed in the dancing glow of her lamp, sat a single object, an old wooden chest. It was unremarkable in appearance, dark, aged oak bound with iron bands that were now a mosaic of rust. Yet its presence here, in this secret, forgotten room, imbued it with an undeniable mystique. A thrill, sharp and exhilarating, shot through Elara. This was it. This was what the cottage had been guarding, what her father, in his final cryptic act, had truly bequeathed. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silent chamber. Every nerve ending tingled with anticipation, a stark contrast to the despair that had so recently consumed her. The scent of ancient wood and dust filled her nostrils, a perfume of forgotten histories. She approached the chest slowly, cautiously, as if its secrets might take flight if rushed. The iron clasp, thick with rust, was secured by a padlock. Reaching into her other pocket, her fingers closed around the second key, the small, rusty one she'd found in the cottage's ledger. It felt cold and rough against her skin, a tangible link to this unfolding mystery. With a deep breath, Elara slid the rusty key into the lock. It grated, protesting years of disuse, but with a firm twist, the tumblers clicked. The sound, amplified in the small room, was a declaration. The padlock, stiff and reluctant, yielded. She unhooked it, the heavy metal clanking against the chest, and carefully lifted the lid. A gasp escaped her lips, a soft, reverent sound that echoed off the stone walls. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay not gold or jewels, but something far more captivating. A necklace. It wasn't glittering with conventional gems. Instead, it seemed to be crafted from interwoven strands of silver, so fine they resembled spun moonlight. At its center, a single, smooth, ovate stone pulsed with a soft internal luminescence. It wasn't a harsh glow, but a gentle, ethereal light, like captured starlight, that cast a faint, otherworldly sheen across the velvet and Elara's mesmerized face. The light pulsed, almost imperceptibly, a slow, steady heartbeat of pure magic. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and carefully lifted the necklace from its resting place. The stone was cool to the touch, smooth as polished glass, yet alive with its inner radiance. It was heavier than it looked, possessing a surprising density that spoke of ancient power. As it lay in her palm, the light intensified slightly, bathing her hand in its soft glow. This was no ordinary trinket. This was something profound, something whispered about in old tales. Beneath the necklace, carefully folded and tied with a brittle, faded ribbon, lay a stack of papers. Their edges were yellowed and frayed, the parchment thin and delicate with age. Elara set the glowing necklace carefully back into the chest, the ambient light in the room dimming subtly as it did so. With an almost surgical precision, she untied the ribbon and unfolded the top sheet. The script was elegant, flowing but unfamiliar. It was an ancient hand, yet the language, though archaic, was English. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, the words slowly resolving into meaning, painting a picture that fractured her understanding of her family, of her father. These weren't mundane deeds or inventories. These were records, chronicles, genealogies stretching back centuries, hinting at a lineage far grander and more complex than she had ever imagined. There were mentions of a line of keepers, of a sacred trust, and of an artifact, the very necklace now pulsing in the chest, referred to as the lumen stone. A dizzying realization washed over her. Her father hadn't dismissed her. He had entrusted her, not with wealth, but with legacy, with a secret burden, and perhaps with a destiny. The cottage, the ruined exterior, the minuscule upkeep fund. It was all a ruse, a clever shield to guard this profound secret from prying eyes. Elara's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the immense weight of discovery. The true inheritance wasn't the sum of money or the dilapidated house. It was a story held within these brittle pages, and the silent, glowing power nestled in the chest. Her future, once a blank canvas of uncertainty, now pulsed with the same enigmatic light as the lumen stone. A royal secret. Elara smoothed the brittle documents across the scarred table, the lumen stone pendant secure in its velvet satchel beside her. Moonlight, fractured by the grimy panes, illuminated the ancient script. Each leaf, frail with antiquity, hinted at a saga far grander than she'd imagined. Her fingers traced the faded characters, painstakingly assembling a narrative woven through generations. The earliest entries spoke of an era of profound unrest, a realm splintered by revolt, and a royal line imperiled. Lyra, an ancestress, appeared frequently, a lady-in-waiting to the princess then, entrusted with a sacred task. Ilara's breath caught as she deciphered an eloquent passage. The princess, in her wisdom and despair, did bestow upon Lyra the heart of Ethel, to be concealed until such a time as the true heir might reclaim their birthright. The heart of Ethel. Her gaze darted to the velvet pouch. Could it be? She carefully loosened the drawstrings, withdrawing the necklace. The lumen stone pulsed with a soft intrinsic luminescence, its intricate silver setting glimmering faintly. Unmistakably, it was the jewel described in the ancient texts, a royal treasure, not merely a family trinket, but a relic of immense historical and political weight. Subsequent pages chronicled Lyra's escape from the besieged capital, her perilous journey to the remote Vancian territories, her family's ancestral lands. There, in the secluded cottage, Lyra had established herself not as a fugitive servant, but as a keeper, a guardian of the sacred trust, a protector of the royal lineage's most potent symbol. Her father, then, was no mere recluse but a link in this ancient chain, a custodian of a centuries-old secret. The pieces coalesced, forming a mosaic of duty, sacrifice, and hidden power that utterly reframed his life, and now her own. The sheer magnitude of the revelation pressed down on her. This was no mere valuable trinket. It was a potential spark for political upheaval, a symbol capable of rekindling forgotten feuds or, conversely, uniting a fragmented populace. The documents precisely outlined the conditions for the heart of Ethel's revelation. When the stars align and the line of the usurper falters, then shall the keeper present the heart to one of true royal blood, bearing the mark. The mark was described as a specific birthmark, though the details remained tantalizingly vague. Ilara reread the passages, her mind racing. The kingdom of Eldoria, in its current form, had long been governed by the descendants of the very usurper mentioned. The reigning Ashworths had consolidated their authority over generations. To unveil the heart of Ethel, to suggest a legitimate claimant to the throne, would be an act of rebellion, even treason in the eyes of the current monarchy. Her hands trembled as she clasped the necklace. Its beauty, once a source of wonder, now felt laden with peril. This wasn't a fortune to be quietly liquidated or leveraged for personal comfort. This was a secret that could cost her life, or worse, imperil countless others if mishandled. The small cottage, once a symbol of her disinheritance, now seemed a fortress, a vault for a secret that could shake Eldoria's foundations. She thought of her father, his quiet intensity, his often distant demeanor. He hadn't dismissed her, he had prepared her. His instructions for the cottage, his insistence on its upkeep, the very existence of the hidden passage. It was all part of a grander design, a ceremonial passing of the torch. He hadn't merely left her a dilapidated home, he had bequeathed her a destiny, a responsibility that dwarfed any material inheritance. A cold knot tightened in her stomach. What was she to do with this knowledge, this power? She, Ilara Vance, who had only ever dreamt of a quiet life, perhaps a small shop, a garden of her own. Now she possessed the key to a royal lineage, a potential challenge to the throne itself. The idea was ludicrous, terrifying. She carefully returned the lumen stone to its pouch, tucking it back into the chest. The documents, too, were meticulously folded and placed within. The chest, once an enigma, now seemed to thrum with a silent gravity. Her world, once clearly defined by her family's perceived disdain, had expanded exponentially, revealing layers of intrigue and danger for which she was utterly unprepared. The faint glow from the lumen stone, even through the velvet, seemed to mock her past innocence. Her future, once uncertain, now held a terrifying clarity. She was no longer just Elara Vance, disinherited daughter. She was a keeper, a guardian of a royal secret, and her life would never be the same. The quiet solitude of her cottage was a fragile illusion. The true storm was brewing, and she stood at its very heart. The moon continued its silent vigil, casting long, dancing shadows across the room as Elara stared into the inky blackness of the night, grappling with the immense, dangerous truth that had just been laid bare. Whispers and shadows. The musty scent of old paper mingled with the faint metallic tang of the internet cafe's stale coffee. Elara hunched over a borrowed laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Days blurred into a relentless cycle of research. The documents from the hidden passage had opened a Pandora's box, each ancient word a key to a forgotten world. She cross-referenced names, dates, and obscure symbols, her initial skepticism slowly giving way to a chilling confirmation. The lumen stone, as her father had dismissively called it, was indeed the heart of Ethel. Online archives, dusty historical texts unearthed from the local library, and even hushed academic forums whispered of its legend. A relic of immense power, a symbol of a lost dynasty, inextricably linked to the founding of Eldoria itself. Its value, both historical and material, was staggering. Beyond the price tag, however, lay a deeper truth. This wasn't just a family heirloom, it was a beacon, a dangerous secret entrusted to her ancestor, Lyra, to safeguard until a true heir could reclaim a stolen throne. Elara, the disinherited daughter, was now the keeper. The weight of that title settled heavily on her shoulders, a cold, hard knot in her stomach. A sharp rap on her cottage door startled Elara from her increasingly frantic research. She'd been poring over faded maps, trying to decipher the cryptic references to Lyra's sanctuary. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she peered through the peephole. Silas, her elder brother, a man whose smarmy charm was thinly veiled by an even thinner layer of politeness. He stood on her porch, a predatory gleam in his eyes, a tailored suit making him seem even more out of place against the rustic cottage. "Elara, darling, long time no see," Silas drawled, his voice oozing insincerity as she reluctantly opened the door. "Just thought I'd drop by and check on you. This place looks rustic." He surveyed the peeling paint and overgrown garden with a disdainful curl of his lip. Elara forced a polite smile. "It's home, Silas. To me, anyway. What brings you all the way out here?" She clutched the doorknob, subtly blocking his entry. Silas chuckled, a dry, grating sound. "Just curious, I suppose. Father always spoke so fondly of this old place. Said it had character, though I never saw it myself." He leaned in conspiratorially, his voice dropping. "Heard you've been doing a bit of digging around, fixing things up." A chill snaked down Elara's spine. Just the usual, a leaky roof, a few loose floorboards, nothing major. She tried to keep her voice even, but a tremor betrayed her. Had he heard something? Did he suspect? Silas hummed, his gaze sweeping over the cottage, lingering for a moment on the basement window. Thought I saw a light on down there the other night. Late? You working on something big? Elara's mind raced. She'd been careless, too absorbed in her discoveries. Just clearing out some old junk. You know how father kept everything. She tried to sound dismissive, but the frantic beat of her heart was deafening in her own ears. Silas merely smiled, a slow, knowing smirk that made her skin crawl. Right, well, don't overdo it. You know how these old houses can be, full of surprises. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air before adding almost as an afterthought. If you ever decide to sell, you know who to call. Thorn Industries is always looking for prime real estate, even the fixer-uppers. He turned to leave, but not before casting one last lingering look at the cottage, a look that spoke of ownership and calculation. Elara watched him go, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Silas's visit wasn't a friendly check-in. It was a reconnaissance mission. He was circling, scenting opportunity. That night, the lumen stone, which she'd been keeping hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her bedroom, felt less like a precious relic and more like a glowing target. Silas's words echoed in her mind, full of surprises. He knew something, or at least suspected. Paranoia gnawed at her, turning every creak of the old house into a potential threat. She carefully unwrapped the pendant, its intricate silverwork gleaming faintly in the moonlight filtering through the window. The embedded stone pulsed with a soft ethereal light, a silent testament to its ancient power. This couldn't stay in such an obvious spot. After an hour of careful consideration, Elara found a new hiding place. Not in the cottage itself, but beneath a loose stone in the oldest part of the garden wall, a section overgrown with ivy and hidden from casual view. She wrapped the necklace in a thick piece of canvas, then placed it in a small waterproof tin before tucking it deep into the dark recess. The air was cool and damp against her skin as she replaced the stone, making sure it blended seamlessly with its surroundings. The act of moving it, of taking proactive measures, brought a small measure of relief, but the underlying tension remained. Silas's probing questions, the unsettling intensity of his gaze, had ignited a new kind of fear. She wasn't just a disinherited daughter anymore. She was a keeper of a dangerous secret, and the shadows around her were growing longer, deeper. The game had begun, and Elara knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was playing for far more than just her cottage. The trap and the turning point. The scent of damp earth still clung to Elara, a constant reminder of the hidden passage and the weight of her burgeoning knowledge. Silas's recent visit, far from merely unsettling her, had sharpened her senses, yanking her from the quietude of research into a state of vigilant readiness. He wouldn't simply vanish, not after that predatory glint in his eyes, the almost imperceptible shift in his tone when he'd hinted at her surprises. Her cottage, once a tranquil haven, now felt like a stage set for a dangerous play, and Elara was determined to orchestrate it. The following afternoon found her not amidst ancient texts, but scrutinizing her home through a strategist's lens. Every creak, every shift of shadow was catalogued as a potential vulnerability or a strategic advantage. The venerable house possessed abundant character and equally abundant points of ingress for an unwelcome guest. The back door, a true relic, boasted a lock more ornamental than secure. The kitchen window, with its warped frame, would yield to a firm shove. But Alara's strategy wasn't fortification, it was misdirection. Her first gambit involved a carefully balanced tower of empty tin cans scavenged from the pantry, arrayed on the kitchen windowsill just inside. They teetered precariously, poised to topple with the slightest jostle. Next, from her father's shed, she unearthed a coil of thin, strong fishing line. This she stretched taut across the back door's threshold, just high enough to snag an unwary foot, securing it with almost invisible tacks. Beyond this tripwire, cleverly concealed, she stacked a precarious column of old copper pots and pans, primed for a cacophony. Finally, for an added layer of psychological discomfort, she dabbed a pungent, almost sulfuric-smelling garden fertilizer onto the doorknob of the hidden basement passage. It wouldn't harm, but it would certainly leave an unforgettable stench on any hand that touched it, a lingering unpleasantness designed to sow doubt. As dusk bled across the sky in hues of bruised purple and faded orange, Alara braced for a long night. She brewed strong chamomile tea, its calming properties utterly lost on her racing pulse. Her heart thrummed with a nervous energy that edged into excitement. All lamps were extinguished, plunging the cottage into near-total darkness, save for slivers of moonlight piercing occasional gaps in the curtains. Wrapped in a thick blanket, she settled into her father's old armchair in the living room, a strategic perch offering auditory access to both the kitchen and the back door. The ancient house groaned around her, its timbers settling, the wind rattling the panes, rendering it difficult to discern natural sounds from an intruder's stealthy approach. Hours crawled, each minute stretching into an eternity. Just as a heavy drowsiness began to descend, a faint scraping sound from the rear of the house jolted Alara awake. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet distinct from the usual symphony of the old house. A beat of silence, then another, more deliberate scrape, followed by a soft click. Silas. Alara held her breath, her grip tightening on the blanket. She heard the faint creak of the back door being nudged inward. A moment of pregnant silence. Then a sudden, violent clatter. The fishing line, the pots, the pans, they all came crashing down in a deafening cascade of metallic clangor. A sharp gasp, followed by a guttural curse, ripped through the night. Alara pictured Silas, tangled and off balance amidst the din. Before the echoes of the pots had fully dissipated, a muffled thud emanated from the kitchen, followed by another sharp, startled cry. The tin cans, undoubtedly. He must have stumbled through the back door, then, disoriented, collided with the kitchen window. Alara heard the frantic fumbling of hands, a muttered string of expletives, and then the hurried scramble of retreating footsteps. The back door slammed shut with a definitive thud, followed by the crunch of gravel as someone sprinted away from the cottage. Alara waited, rigid in the armchair, for what felt like an age. The ensuing silence was even more profound than before, broken only by the frantic beat of her own heart. Slowly, she allowed herself to breathe. He was gone. He hadn't found anything. He hadn't even breached her initial defenses. A strange warmth diffused through her, chasing away the night's chill. It wasn't merely relief, it was a potent surge of triumph. She, Elara Vance, the disinherited daughter, the quiet researcher, had outsmarted her cunning, ambitious brother. The elaborate trap hadn't harmed him, but it had shaken him, sent him scurrying away with nothing but ringing ears and a lingering stench on his hands, a silent testament to her resolve. As dawn began to paint the sky in soft greys and nascent pinks, Elara rose, stretching the stiffness from her limbs. She walked through the cottage, surveying the disarray. The pots and pans lay scattered, the tin cans glinted on the kitchen floor. A small smile touched her lips. She wasn't simply protecting a secret now. She was actively defending it. This was more than just a fight for her inheritance. It was a turning point. She was no longer a victim of circumstance, but a shrewd player in a game she was beginning to understand, and even, to her own surprise, enjoy. The heart of Ethel was safe, and Elara, the keeper, was just getting started. A new legacy. The morning after Silas's ignominious retreat, the cottage breathed differently. Beyond the faint scent of singed wool and the subtle tremor in the floorboards from his clumsy exit, Elara herself had transformed. Her initial terror had receded, replaced by a surging tide of self-assurance. She had outmaneuvered him, safeguarding her home, her secrets, and her burgeoning influence. Yet this sweet triumph offered only a temporary lull. Silas would undeniably return, his resolve hardened, and perhaps his methods more ruthless. The heart of Ethel, pulsating with ancient power, clearly needed a more secure sanctuary than a cottage riddled with traps. Elara spent the morning deliberating, the necklace a significant weight in her palm. The black market was an unthinkable avenue. Its profound historical value demanded reverence. Donating it anonymously felt like relinquishing the agency she had so recently claimed. Then an idea ignited, promising both refuge and recognition: the Eldorian Royal Museum. Specifically, Dr. Evelyn Reed, a celebrated historian and archaeologist known for her unwavering integrity and discerning eye for genuine artifacts. Dr. Reed wouldn't dismiss Elara or her unusual tale. Taking a deep breath, Elara crafted a cautious email, sidestepping details about hidden passages or Silas, instead emphasizing the unique provenance of a cherished family heirloom she believed held considerable importance. She attached several high-resolution images, highlighting the intricate carvings and the central stone's ethereal glow. The reply arrived remarkably fast, within the hour. Dr. Reed expressed polite interest and requested an in-person consultation. The following Tuesday, Elara navigated the museum's bustling corridors. The necklace nestled in a velvet pouch within her satchel. The air was cool, carrying the faint perfume of aging paper and polished timber. Dr. Reed's office was an oasis of order amidst the museum's grand disarray. Shelves overflowing with texts, maps pinned to corkboards, and a spacious, pristine desk. Dr. Reed herself was precisely as Elara had envisioned. Sharp, with perceptive, kind eyes, her dark hair neatly secured in a practical bun. "Ms. Vance, thank you for coming," Dr. Reed greeted, her voice calm and measured. "Please have a seat." A knot of apprehension tightened in Elara's stomach. "Thank you, Dr. Reed. I appreciate your time." She carefully placed the velvet pouch on the desk. Dr. Reed's gaze lingered on the pouch before she extended a hand. "May I?" "Of course," Elara nodded, her heart thrumming. "With deliberate precision, Doctor." Reed unfastened the drawstring and emptied the contents onto a pristine white cloth. The heart of Ethel lay revealed, its intricate silver filigree catching the soft office light, the central sapphire radiating an inner fire that seemed to pulse faintly. Dr. Reed leaned closer, her expression shifting from professional curiosity to profound awe. She picked up a jeweler's loupe, her usually steady fingers trembling almost imperceptibly as she scrutinized the artifact. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Dr. Reed turned the necklace repeatedly, tracing the ancient symbols etched into its reverse side. "Remarkable," she murmured, more to herself than to Alara. She produced a small, specialized kit, meticulously taking readings and cross-referencing them with charts in a thick, leather-bound tome. After what felt like an hour, she finally leaned back, her eyes wide with a blend of reverence and excitement. "Miss Vance?" Dr. Reed began, her voice hushed. This is extraordinary. The craftsmanship, the composition of the silver, the unique properties of the sapphire. It surpasses anything I've ever encountered. We have records, even ancient legends, of a relic known as the Heart of Ethel, believed lost for centuries. A potent artifact deeply interwoven with Eldorian history, intrinsically linked to the very foundation of our kingdom. Alara felt a dizzying surge of relief and vindication. "So it's real?" Dr. Reed looked up, a faint smile gracing her lips. "More real than any of us dared to imagine. Its historical value is incalculable. As for its monetary worth," she paused, her gaze thoughtful. "It's difficult to quantify, but it would undoubtedly secure your future, Ms. Vance, and then some." Alara's breath hitched. "Secure my future?" "Indeed," Dr. Reed confirmed. "The museum would be exceptionally honored to acquire such a significant piece of Eldorian heritage. We would, of course, offer a substantial sum, enough to allow you to live comfortably, restore your home, and pursue any endeavors you wish, free from financial worry." The oppressive weight that had burdened Alara for so long, the constant anxiety about her meagre inheritance, about Silas's looming threat, began to dissipate. This wasn't merely money, it was liberation, it was recognition, it was a tangible affirmation of her intrinsic worth, far surpassing the disinheritance that had so long defined her. "We would also guarantee its absolute security," Dr. Reed added, as if perceiving Alara's unspoken thoughts. "It would be housed in our most formidable vault, under constant surveillance, and eventually displayed with the utmost reverence." Alara envisioned her cottage, no longer a symbol of neglect, but a blank canvas for her aspirations. She thought of Mr. Henderson, his quiet support, and the nascent community she was starting to discover. This was her chance. Not merely to escape, but to build. "I accept," Alara said, her voice steady, a newfound certainty resonating in her tone. A genuine smile finally bloomed on Dr. Reed's face. "Excellent. We'll initiate the paperwork immediately. And Miss Vance, thank you for entrusting us with such a treasure." Walking out of the museum, Alara felt lighter than she had in years. The city hummed around her, but now it sounded like a symphony of burgeoning possibilities. She wouldn't just restore the cottage, she would rebuild it, not as a monument to what she had sacrificed, but as a testament to what she had gained. A new legacy, forged not from passive inheritance, but from audacious action, from intellect, and from the quiet resilience she had unearthed within herself. The heart of Ethel was safe, and so, finally, was she. The game wasn't over, but Alara Vance had just claimed her first substantial victory.